Not the soft bathroom bulb, actual sun, and there it is. Not the wrinkle. You made peace with the wrinkle years ago. It's the thin dark seam of colour sitting inside it. Like your foundation took one look at your smile line and simply gave up and pulled there instead of gliding over it. I've spent my career on the other side of the counter, watching women twist their faces toward window light the second they think no one's looking, hunting for exactly that seam. And here's something it took me 20 years in this industry to actually believe: that seam is very rarely your skin's fault. It's a formula built for a face 15 years younger than yours, sold to you by someone who never once mentioned that. So today, 2 things. 4 foundations that are quite literally sitting in your wrinkles right now, with a real swap for each one. And 8 that were actually built to solve this. I'm saving the very last one for the end on purpose because it's the only foundation on this entire list made by a company that answers to nobody at all. No board, no shareholders, no quarterly earnings call. Just one family that's quietly run the same house for 100 years. Stay with me for that one. But first, one idea, because I want you carrying it through everything that follows. Coverage and light are not the same job. The industry has spent decades getting you to think about foundation purely in terms of coverage, how much it hides, how long it survives a humid afternoon. Nobody trains you to think about what it does to light. And after 50, light is the whole game. A wrinkle isn't really a dark line. It's a fold, a tiny cliff that light can't reach the bottom of. A flat, heavy, fully matte foundation does nothing to help that. If anything, it thickens the walls of the fold and deepens the shadow inside it. A foundation built to move with light does the opposite. It doesn't erase the fold. Nothing does. It just stops the fold from casting quite so hard a shadow. This genuinely is the whole philosophy Korean formulators built an entire category around. In 2007, a research team in Seoul solved this exact problem completely by accident while trying to build something else entirely. I'll tell you that story properly in a few minutes because it's a very good one. For now, just hold on to this. It was never the wrinkle. It was always the finish. Let's start with the 4 you should probably be side-eyeing in your own bathroom cabinet right now. You've likely had this one in your bag for a decade. So let's talk about why it might be the wrong choice now. Estee Lauder Double Wear Stay in Place has been the industry's answer to "I need this to survive 12 hours" since the late 90s. And I understand the loyalty. It genuinely does not budge. That's precisely the problem. It was engineered for oil control in punishing humidity, a fully matte, high pigment formula that sits on skin like a second, flatter skin. On smooth, oil-producing younger skin, that's a technical triumph. On mature skin, where texture is the whole terrain, that same flat matte finish has nowhere to go but down into every line. And once it sets, it does not move, including out of the seam you didn't want it in. If you love the coverage but not what it does to your smile lines, look at Laneige's Neo Cushion instead. The same "this needs to last" promise, delivered as a lightweight, dewy liquid stamped on with a sponge rather than baked into a mattifying shell. It's made by Amora Pacific, the same Korean conglomerate behind Sulwhasoo and Innisfree. And yes, it is a conglomerate too. Korean beauty is not some indie cottage industry. It just happened to get the finish question right early. Here's one that surprises people. Makeup Forever HD Skin. It has real pedigree, built by makeup artists for film and television. And HD isn't a marketing word here. It was engineered for the unforgiving glare of high-definition cameras. A very specific job. Blur pores, erase shine, hold up under studio lights, hot enough to fry an egg. On smooth, usually much younger skin. Put that same silicone-forward, full-coverage film on mature skin with real texture in ordinary daylight, and by early afternoon, It can pool exactly where your skin creases when you smile. And here's the quiet part. Makeup Forever has been owned by LVMH, yes, the Louis Vuitton conglomerate, since 1999, with reported ambitions to build it into a billion-euro brand. It never happened. Investment stayed thin, growth stalled, and this year, LVMH has reportedly been shopping the brand around to sell it off entirely. A formula that good, sitting inside a company that quietly stopped believing in it. That tells you something. For the same coverage without the creasing, NARS Light Reflecting Foundation does almost the opposite job on purpose. Formulated to bounce light off skin rather than flatten it down. Exactly the lens we opened with. Revlon Color Stay Full Coverage has been a drugstore staple since the 90s. Oil-free, genuinely mattifying, built to survive a full shift. It's also, on a lot of drier, mature skin, a formula that can look chalky and cling to fine lines by lunchtime because there's very little in it to keep it moving once it sets. Some of that is old formula chemistry that hasn't been meaningfully revisited, and there's a reason for that. Revlon spent all of 2022 in Chapter 11 bankruptcy and only emerged in 2023, majority owned now by its former lenders rather than the family that ran it for generations. A company clawing its way out of bankruptcy is not, generally, pouring money into reformulating a decades-old shade range. If you love the drugstore price point, look at Merit Minimalist instead. Thinner, more tinted serum than mask, and one of the rare foundation names left that's still independently run rather than folded into somebody's portfolio. And then there's Bare Minerals, the original loose mineral powder, the brand that basically invented the idea that makeup could be clean enough to sleep in. Worn dry, with no emollient base at all, it very often does the opposite of what it promises on mature skin, clinging to dry patches and settling into fine lines instead of sitting smoothly across them because there's simply nothing in the formula to help it move. The ownership story here is genuinely telling. Shiseido bought Bare Minerals outright in 2010 for $1.7 billion, at the absolute height of the clean beauty wave. By 2021, Shiseido sold it off, along with Buxom and Laura Mercier, to a private equity firm for a reported $700 million, roughly two-thirds below the original asking price, openly calling it a struggling brand in need of new ownership. In that same stretch, Shiseido kept NARS as one of its highest priority global brands. Same parent company, two very different fates. One it doubled down on, one it let go of. If you want the my skin can breathe feeling without the dryness, Ilia's Super Serum Skin Tint is built the opposite way. Serum first, minerals second. It's majority owned now by Famille C, the investment arm of the Corten Clarins family, the same family behind Clarins Skincare. Okay, deep breath. Now, the 8 that actually earn a spot in your bag. And the story behind who makes some of these will surprise you more than the products themselves. Start cheap, because cheap isn't the same as wrong. Maybelline Instant Age Rewind sits around $12 and is one of the very few drugstore foundations actually formulated with a firming, glow-forward finish in mind, rather than pure coverage. Built, from the name down, for exactly the face we're talking about today. L'Oreal has owned Maybelline since 1996. Hold that name. We're going to run into it twice more before we're done. Next, IT Cosmetics CC Plus Cream, or the newer Your Skin But Better Serum, both closer to $45. Genuinely good origin story. Founder Jamie Kern Lima built it to cover her own rosacea for television because nothing on the market gave her coverage without looking like a mask under studio lights. It's a cream serum hybrid, closer to skincare than to matte foundation. Exactly the texture that behaves on mature skin. L'Oreal bought it in 2016 for $1.2 billion. Name number 2. And third, Giorgio Armani Beauty's Luminous Silk Foundation, closer to $65. Thin as water, exactly what the name promises. Silk, not spackle. L'Oreal has held the license to make Armani's beauty line since 1988, recently renewed all the way out to 2050. So however the rest of the Armani fashion empire gets divided up now that Mr. Armani has passed, the beauty side stays put. Here's what I actually want you to sit with. A $12 drugstore stick, a $45 cult favorite, and a $65 Italian luxury foundation. 3 completely different shelves, 3 completely different customers who each think they're buying from 3 completely different companies. All 3 made under one roof. This is what I meant right at the start about the theatre and the formula having almost nothing to do with each other. The theatre is the packaging, the counter, the name on the door. What you're actually paying more for, tier to tier, is refinement of the same underlying finish philosophy, not an entirely different company. Now, the story I promised you. In 2007, a research team at the Korean beauty company Amara Pacific was trying to solve a completely unglamorous problem. Women kept ruining their makeup every time they reapplied sunscreen during the day. The team ran over 3,600 tests on 200 different sponge materials, bedding, foam, bath sponges, anything with the right texture, before landing on a urethane foam that could hold liquid without drying out. They took inspiration of all things from the ink stamps used in Korean parking garages, the ones that punch your ticket in one even mess-free press. In March 2008, they released IOP Air Cushion. It wasn't even meant to be a foundation first. It was meant to be a portable way to reapply sun protection over makeup. Women immediately started using it as their entire base instead because it did the impossible. Full coverage with a finish that let light move across skin instead of sitting flat on top of it. Every cushion compact you've ever swiped through a Sephora aisle traces back to this one team and this one sponge. It's not just my favorite entry on this list, it's the whole thesis in one product. Fifth, Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Longwear, around $49, built for exactly the glow knot flat finish we keep circling back to. Since 2020, the brand has been majority owned by Puig, the Spanish company also behind Byredo and Paco Rabanne. Charlotte Tilbury herself kept a stake and is still creative director, but Puig is fully assuming ownership by 2031. Worth knowing before you fall for the one woman built this whole empire story, still told at the counter. Sixth, and this might be the biggest surprise on the whole list, e.l.f. Cosmetics, $10 or less. e.l.f. Beauty is one of the only real players left in this industry with no controlling parent company at all. Publicly traded, majority owned by ordinary index and mutual funds, answerable to a board rather than a conglomerate boardroom. Their Halo Glow and Camo CC products punch enormously above their price for exactly the luminous buildable finish that suits mature skin. Part of how they afford to sell it that cheap is that there's no luxury house overhead sitting on top of the formula. Seventh, Clinique's even better or beyond perfecting foundations, closer to $35. Worth calling back to Double Wear here, because Clinique is owned by the very same company, Estée Lauder. It was built in 1968 specifically for sensitive, reactive skin. Dermatologists developed from day one, and it shows. It's the gentlest, most breathable finish on this whole list. Proof that the same parent capable of something as heavy as Double Wear absolutely knows how to make something light. They just don't put the two side by side and let you compare. And finally, The one I told you I was saving, Chanel Le Beige Healthy Glow, around $60, is the finish that best embodies everything we've talked about. A wash of pigment thin enough to let your actual skin show through it. But the real reason it closes this list isn't the formula. It's who's behind it. Chanel has never gone public. It has no shareholders outside one family, Alain and Gerard Wertheimer, grandsons of the man who partnered with Coco Chanel back in 1924, and their family has held complete, outright ownership since the early 1970s. No quarterly earnings calls forcing a rushed reformulation to hit a number. No board quietly shopping the brand around, the way LVMH reportedly is with Makeup Forever, or Shiseido did with Bare Minerals. Just one family deciding on its own timeline what stays and what changes. Whether that automatically makes the formula better is genuinely up for debate. Chanel isn't cheap, and freedom from shareholders doesn't mean freedom from marketing. But it's the one name on this entire list answering to absolutely no one but itself. It was never the wrinkle, it was always the finish. And this is the one finish nobody had to compromise to hit a shipping deadline. So how do you actually use any of this next time you're standing at a counter or scrolling a product page at 11 at night? First, stop shopping by coverage percentage and start shopping by finish word. Look for luminous, dewy, radiant, skin tint, serum foundation. Be genuinely wary of matte, full coverage, and 24-hour wear stacked together on one label. That combination is almost always chasing oil control on younger skin, not light on yours. Second, borrow the one technique every cushion compact on this list was built around. Pat, don't drag. Rubbing foundation across a line pushes pigment down into it. Pressing it in with a sponge or your fingertips, the way a cushion puff is designed to be used, lets product sit on the skin's surface instead of settling into the crease. In Seoul, nobody would sell you a foundation without also teaching you this. It matters more than half the product swaps on this list. Third, go thin to thick. A lighter serum style base first, building coverage only where you actually need it, rather than one uniform heavy layer over the whole face. Uniform heavy layers are exactly what settles. And fourth, sample before you commit to a full size. Skin chemistry genuinely shifts through your 40s and 50s, sometimes within the same year. So the shade and formula that worked 2 years ago may simply not be the one your skin needs now. That's not a failure on your part. That's just biology doing what biology does. A few honest caveats before you go hunting. Inventory and formulas shift by season and region, so treat this as a map of what to look for rather than a screenshot and buy list. If you're pairing any of these with a genuinely new active, a retinol underneath, say, patch test it regardless of how gentle the marketing claims it is. And one thing I want to be very clear about, several of these foundations include SPF, and that's a nice bonus, not a substitute. The amount most of us actually apply doesn't come close to hitting the number printed on the label. Keep wearing a real, separately applied sunscreen underneath every day, no matter which foundation you land on. That part isn't up for debate. Here's the bigger thing I want you to leave with, because it's bigger than 12 products. A handful of companies, L'Oreal, Estée Lauder, Shiseido, LVMH, Puig, Amore Pacific, quietly make almost everything on the beauty aisle, at every price point, from the drugstore end cap to the counter with the velvet stool. That was never, on its own, the problem. Clinique is owned by the same giant as Double Wear, and it's genuinely one of the gentlest formulas out there. Chanel answers to no giant at all, and that alone doesn't make it automatically right for your skin. Ownership tells you almost nothing about quality by itself. What actually separated the 4 foundations sitting in your wrinkles from the 8 that aren't wasn't the size of the company behind them. It was whether anyone in that company was still paying attention, still reformulating, still funding the research, still asking what a 55-year-old woman's skin actually needs from a foundation right now, instead of coasting on a name that worked beautifully for someone 20 years younger. Bare Minerals got sold off once Shiseido stopped paying attention. Makeup Forever is reportedly for sale for the same reason. Attention, not ownership, is the real dividing line. It was never the wrinkle. It was always the finish, and the finish is simply where a company's attention finally shows up. Or doesn't. Tell me in the comments which of these you're already quietly using and which one you're finally ready to retire. I read every one of them, and if this is the first time you've heard the parking lot stamp story behind the Cushion Compact, subscribe. Every week on this channel, I take something that's been sitting in your bathroom cabinet for years and tell you exactly what it's made of, who's actually behind it, and whether it still deserves the spot it's holding. Next week, the eye cream's doing absolutely nothing for the price you're paying, and the 2 drugstore ones quietly outperforming them. I'll see you there.